Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Starfield video. So today we're going to take a look at the Outpost base building system and see what we can pull out from the Starfield Direct a couple of weeks ago. Have a look at everything we can see and everything we can infer from the footage we have available. So let's crack on. Obviously, we've got here the initial opening of the Outpost segment. We're on a planet down here that we can see called Chiba 4A. So that looks like it's probably a moon, given the 4A bit. So probably fourth planet, first moon of. We're going to drop down the Outpost unit that will designate the area that we can build in. So stop having a look there. There we go. So we have the Outpost unit. We've seen this before. It's on a foundation, which is cool. Obviously, with legs like this, and with basically anything that doesn't have a foundation to it, uneven ground, which it clearly is here, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. You're going to wind up with stuff floating, or it will have to sink into the ground in some way. Putting it on a foundation is not a bad way of doing that. There are a couple of things I've spotted about this. Firstly, that obviously this is always going to be here, so you're going to have to find some way of incorporating it into your wider build. Fortunately, the design matches up with a lot of the other elements, so it's not too much of an issue. With the foundation, you'll see in a minute, it kind of rotates and it drops down to its lowest possible point, and then it rises up again, and then it drops again. Presumably because orientation affects how low it can sink. I'm not entirely sure why that would be the case. But you also see this kind of shadowy line here, sort of about there. That is basically as low as it goes, so it is going to stick up. And there's a few issues that I've noticed as we go forward that might be a little bit of a concern regarding some of these foundations, or I have concerns about. But on the whole, it's looking pretty positive. So cool thing up here, available resources in the top corner. So we've got lead and the atomic symbol, the chemistry symbol, the periodic table symbol, whatever the term is called, but it's now escaping me, up on the corner there. I'm guessing this is not available resources on the player so much as this is what you'll be able to extract and gather from an outpost placed in this location. I guess. That's my theory. It's a little unclear at this point, but that seems likely to be the case. Obviously, we can confirm, which is plate, rotate, and cancel should we wish to. See it rotate a bit. There we go, and I'm dropping it there. So, the menu's opened up. There we go. Outpost Beacon, it's called. Okay, that's fine. So, we have interesting details down here that is key. You've got the planet name and Outpost 1. This is important because we'll be coming back to that name in a bit. We've got a build limit down here, which you can't massively see too clearly because the Windows program that I'm using here to play this back is slightly annoying, but still. And so, we've got cargo amount, crew, needed power, total power, and production rate, as well as some control stuff. So, interesting that there is a cargo number here. I wonder if that means there's a limit to how much cargo you can actually store at an outpost. Possible. We'd need to know more about the nature of cargo and what goes on with it in Starfield. We know it's going to be sort of falling into OK cargo and contraband, and you can smuggle and things like that. So it might relate to that. It might relate to stuff that's specifically packed with a view to moving it somewhere else or selling it. We know there's a system to move stuff between outposts, so how much that relates to this, I don't know. But we will be seeing a bit more of that in a moment. So, you can pick this thing up, the Outpost Beacon, by the way, and move it somewhere else after you've initially placed it. If we look in the distance here, you sort of see that yellowy line, yellowy green. It looks to be a decent-sized build area. Hard to say exactly how far out that actually is. It's circular, so it's obviously based more on Fallout 76's build area than, say, Fallout 4, which obviously is sort of unique to its location. But Fallout 76 allows you to build just about anywhere, as Starfield will, which Fallout 4 didn't, so not surprising there. It does look to be considerably larger than Fallout 4's build area. So what we get to look at here is a number of hubs. This is basically going to be the main outposts that we're having a look at through most of the footage here. Mostly. There is an exception later on. But we've got some interesting stuff. We've got some different variations of hubs. I suspect these are two different versions of the same thing here. We can see in here we've got table and some more tables and furniture. We'll actually see the inside of this close up later in a couple of shots. Yeah, I've got a sofa there. This is the airlock entrance, which I have some potential concerns regarding. Potentially, but maybe not. and then a big open hab here, which I think, if it's the same one we're going to see later, there's a mixed bag of stuff in that one. And then we've got one there, and one down here. So, obviously difficult to see what's in these two. Cool that these things on the top sort of animate. It looks like they might place on top of the hab separately, because obviously this one doesn't have that. So these look like they might be separate components, which implies they probably have some kind of function. This looks like some kind of communications array. Not so sure about what these might do. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what these actually have to do, whether or not they're tied to some of the skills that we're going to see later, because there's some interesting potential implications of the skills as well. So also before we jump on, this I think is a landing platform. You can see the sort of stairs coming up here. I think that's going to be a landing pad for your ship. And we've got some sci-fi shipping containers over on this side. My hunch on these is that it's probably more decorative than actually functional, but I don't know. It might be to do with storing cargo, and you might need to build a certain amount of it to store that cargo, because we did see that cargo figure earlier on the UI, if we scroll back a bit down here. So maybe you'll need these to store cargo, and the more you have, the more cargo you can store at your outpost. But as I say, we need to know more about what is cargo, how does the systems relate to cargo, and that sort of thing before we can really be sure. But in either case, this is also called Decorative Elements as well, and adds interest to the external areas, because beyond that, external decoration is limited, which is not terribly surprising, although it does look like we might have additional things we can pick up, because there's a lot of Bethesda-built outposts and stuff in the game that are obviously NPC-orientated, and some of those do have stuff outside and placed around, so maybe there will be more options that place outside as well. Or maybe some of the stuff that's inside that we see in a bit could actually be placed outside, depending. Obviously, if you're on a world with no atmosphere, no oxygen, or a toxic atmosphere, something like that, you're going to need sealed habs like this in order to not have to be in a spacesuit 24 hours a day. Obviously, once you head out, this is an airlock, as we'll see in a minute, that's when you put your spacesuit on and you head out. But still, if there's no atmosphere, you're going to need contained. However, we also see from a number of things that we're going to see in a moment that outposts can be built on worlds that we know are almost certainly close to Earth-like in their atmospheres, that are standard oxygen levels, and that you don't need a spacesuit to breathe on them. So that begs the question, what variations on these prefabs are we going to get? Are we going to be able to build things that are more custom built, so we position our own walls and snap pieces together? That might actually work on a system similar to this, even on airless planets as well, because you could just say, okay, I'll put foundation down, I'll build the walls and the roof, now it looks however I want it to look, as opposed to being a specific prefabricated look like this. And, maybe if we look at this square one for a minute, you take the greenish texture here and place it in the middle instead of having the glass one, and then you have a glass everywhere else and just a solid in the middle. Possibly. Who knows? Right now, there's only a very small section of the menus being shown, so whether or not that sort of thing is an option, how much flexibility for free building, I suppose, is an open question. Obviously, as I say, you need sealed things on, or it makes sense to have sealed habitats on an airless planet, but elsewhere, more flexibility would also be a possibility. We'll see in here in a minute. I'm wondering whether or not theoretically it might be possible, if there's oxygen, to put like a patio door type thing in and a balcony. Something like that. That would be very cool. But wild speculation at that point. So let's move on a little. So we're inside here. We're going to look at some of the decorative elements, and we peer out the back to a ship that is landing. My hunch is that this is probably to do with the sort of supply line systems. So it's been indicated by Bethesda that we can connect our outposts somehow and share resources between them, move resources between outposts. If we go back to Fallout 4, you could do that if you had the appropriate skill, and that basically connected your workbenches, so anything you had stored at one outpost was also accessible from another. So now you can have multiple outposts, multiple planets. How you connect the storage, we're not entirely sure how that's going to work yet, but it does appear that spaceships are going to be involved in doing that, because we see later on, again in a bit more detail, two landing pads, one that's got the Frontier parked on it, and another one that has another ship landing on it, much like this, that I suspect has to do with running cargo between your outposts. But we've got some interesting decoration items around here. We've got some filing cabinets, cupboard type things down here. That looks like a small lockbox type deal. We've got a big crate labelled storage, which is not really shocking, because what else do you use a crate for? So I wouldn't read too much into that, but maybe it is a storage place, maybe it's just decorative, who knows, but still, it's cool. Got some other bits and pieces around. That looks more or less like it's an advanced kind of dolly or sack truck type deal. We'll see it later on. Wondering what this table might be, some kind of mission planning thing maybe, or possibly a fast travel related thing, if you want to fast travel out of your outpost, either to somewhere else on the planet, or maybe to another planet, without actually having to do the legwork of going and getting into your ship. Although I kind of hope not on that, because getting into your ship and going is a significant part of the sci-fi vibe and fun. It's probably just a cool decorative item, I would guess. We've got some interesting sci-fi fluorescent lighting going on up top there as well. Move on to the next one. So, when we were at the sort of top-down view before, and I was pointing at the hab, I might as well scrub back and I'll show you, here, this whole thing here would appear to be the thing we are looking at now. So if I go back to here, you can kind of see this window and a lot of the furniture sort of from above. It's not very clear, but it looks like, and we'll see a subsequent shot later on of the same room from a different angle. So it looks like this is the inside of it. And this is where I mean about the sort of patio door and balcony type possibility. If you swap this whole section out, this window section, for a window with the door in it, you could put a balcony out there and walk out there, assuming there is sufficient atmosphere on this moon, which is open to some debate at the moment, because we don't see any stats to confirm one way or the other, but the sky is Earth-like, shall we say, in that it is blue, and the reason it's basically the same shade of blue as Earth is because of the way the light bounces off the particular combination of chemicals in the atmosphere, or in this case, oxygen and the like. So in all likelihood, this looks like it could possibly be breathable out there, although we only see the player in a spacesuit when they are out there, so who knows, in short. Do like this little ship here. I would absolutely love to have one of those IRL for my shelf behind me. That would be very, very cool. Got some kind of lantern. Little globe kind of, I don't know if this is just a spinny globe type thing or if it's actually a drinks cabinet or something. Cool. Little decorative items. Interesting settee sofa design there. Kind of sci-fi, but also kind of old school at the same time. Kind of cool to keep an eye on this because you get to see quite a range of seating options and furniture options as we go on. Given how short this is, that's quite cool to see. So we are outside now. We look back towards the entrance, and this makes me wonder if we are on the same planet or not. It looks like it, but it also looks different. And stuff's a different shape, so I'm guessing they played around with it a fair bit to get different bits of footage and stuff. Obviously, this is the airlock and the entrance into the building there, and then it comes off this direction, which is not consistent with what we've seen before. There is the Outposts module thing. I forgot the name of it now. Interestingly, we've got a character here interacting with it, and I don't know if that's supposed to be the player or if it's an ally, because obviously we know we can assign allies to our outpost to do varying things, which we'll look at in a bit more detail in a moment. Yeah, it's interesting to see what interaction might be going on here. I'm guessing it's probably a player and they're just there for the sake of the footage, but still interesting. So you've got Vasco wandering through here. I love the detail on the spacesuits, by the way. That is so cool. So, cool to see. Interesting details. If we look in the background here, we've got this sort of spire, and I'm pretty sure this is a resource extractor of some kind. We'll see in the next shot in more detail. In fact, you can see a bit at the edge here as well. So there we go. There is what would appear to be an extractor. Judging by the way this is going up and down and drilling and the hydraulics and stuff, it looks like that's probably what it is. It's got a very mass-produced, kind of prefabricated sort of design to it. It's like they could produce millions of them so that people can just grab them and take them anywhere and use them on any planet. Much like the Habs do to some degree with the structures, which makes sense given that that's probably what you'd want to do in space exploration. It's also consistent with most sci-fi themes that we've seen before, so they're not reinventing the wheel in a way with that, which kind of makes sense because to a certain amount, having your expectations met makes the world more credible, so it's not such a bad thing. Also, assuming we're on the same planet here, we're really getting a look at that very, very Earth-like sky there. The kind of soft corners on it are interesting. They do hark back a little bit to the design aesthetic of Fallout, particularly 4 and 76, which is quite cool. But I think it's more just kind of a mass-produced plastic shell type deal. So there we go. Moving on, we see the other side of it here and see it in a bit more detail. Now you can see why you see these in the distance, obviously more extractors. there are obviously a number of them around. So we've got a big couple of storage bins here of some kind. They look like they might hold raw resources to my eye. Something along those lines. Difficult to say, but it looks kind of like that. The big question, of course, again, that we've sort of touched on already is, are these decorative or are they functional? Do you actually store stuff here? Do you store cargo here? Or are they there just to add interest to the scene, as it were? Either would be absolutely fine with me. Even if they are functional or decorative, I will use them for the opposite function, yeah. But still, interesting to see, and good to see little bits of extra detail to make the whole thing more interesting. This looks to be a landing pad here, by the way. We'll see it in a couple of other shots where ships are landing on it, and I think we can infer from the same top surface that that's what this is intended to be. And it looks quite cool. As to whether or not this is the player's ship landing pad or the landing pad that a ship used to shuttle resources between outposts lands on is open to some debate at the moment. Some interesting icons on the side of the HUD here. That looks like it's probably a placed marker. You know, ping this location so you can go to it type vibe, and that gives the same vibe. I'm guessing that might be a player outpost marker, because my theory here is that this is just a reverse angle of the previous shot. So if we go back to, not that one actually, this one, you can see you've got the outpost marker here. It's probably quite close to where it was originally dropped. It might have been moved a bit. My theory is we go off the screen to the right this way, and that's where the next shot is. Looking at this is probably an ally actually, as the suit does not match the player characters. Not that they couldn't have changed, I just doubt they did. But yeah, as we come back to here, we see this ping here, and that, if my theory is correct, that we've just gone off the screen to the right from the previous one, then that's pointing back towards where the outpost unit is. So this could be a player outpost icon. So there's an interesting hint regarding the UI. Let's jump on a little bit further. Some more stuff here that, again, storage, probably, but difficult to say, might also be decorative. It's very, in keeping with the kind of industrial vibe that this outpost has, definitely got a strong industry vibe, which seems to be one of the major functions of Outpost, sort of gathering resources and also acquiring stuff that you can kind of put together to sell and trade and make money off. So we have a top-down Flycam view. So we've got two views that you can actually build in. We've got the face-on as you're walking around one, and the Flycam. We've also got a toggle view icon there. I'll let you change between that. There's a couple of interesting things here. So first up, we've got the build requirements up in the top corner. That's fine. It's kind of the opposite way around to Fallout 76's menu sits on the screen, but that's fine. This airlock uses surprisingly few resources. 1 aluminium, 1 sealant, and 1 lead for a fairly substantial staircase and a whole structural unit that contains the airlock. That's interesting. I would go ahead and assume either this might change, or it's a case of it being simplified and video gamified for the sake of making it fun. But that's interesting nonetheless. Looking closely at this airlock here, you see cannot place item intersects with existing object. I think it's probably too low here. Now we do see later on the staircase clipping through the ground, but the staircase is quite extensive. I think it kind of has at least 2 rising levels and therefore 2 landings as well. My big question is how low can we sink it? Because we're going to be looking at something in just a moment where you see the height of the foundations being an issue, and also the whole thing and almost all of the outpost stuff that we're seeing here is really quite high above the ground. It's up in the air on not quite a stick exactly, but a stick-like foundation. So to my mind, it could be a bit more aesthetic, especially if you're building on level ground, if you can sit it closer to the ground, but it's really hard to tell, so we shall have to see. Obviously, we've got build limit that you can't see too clearly again because helpful UI on my software here. But we'll start to see that rise up in a minute. Nothing's been built at this point, so we will see that increase in a moment. Over here, we have the different tabs. So there are a dozen different tabs here that look to be dividing up the sort of different categories of stuff you can build. Here we've got structures. Now this is the 5th tab across. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, just to make sure I'm not going crazy. 4 more on the left of it here that basically come up first. So I wonder what comes here as being more primary than structures. Possibly the ability to free build stuff, but we don't know. This is the only tab we actually see in use in any of the footage. So as to what's under any of the others, decorations we can apply, resource extractors we can apply, however you build, landing pads for your ship, that's got to be there somewhere, but exact details of it is, well, we have yet to see what's going on. Interesting point on here, we see a whole bunch of different structures. So we've got Outpost airlock, 4-wall hab, hydroponic hab A, 1 of 2. 1 of 2 on the 4-walled hab, science hab small, 1 of 2, and so on. So we know these are different items, different versions of it, rather than build limits, because nothing's been built at all yet. And also we see things getting placed down and them cycling through it later on. So it's definitely the variations being listed here. The fact we've got Hab A and Hab Small suggests that there is a Hab Large and a Hab B, so different types, different styles, other than what we've got here. That this player at this point has obviously not unlocked, so we're not seeing them. This is just probably, I would think, just the basic stuff you start out with, or maybe some of the early stuff you pick up. So very, very simplistic here. And if you go back to Fallout 4's showcase back in 2015 at E3, they did showcase the building system, but what they showed off was not even coming close to what the system ended up being capable of doing. So it is all likely, in all likelihood, Starfield will be able to do a lot more than it appears here. But it does look like there'll be a whole lot more stuff coming onto this. The watchtower is interesting. It kind of implies that outpost attacks will be a thing. Otherwise, why else would you need a watchtower? We don't see any evidence of defences, but that might well be a tab here. There is a skill we'll see in a bit, robotics, that talks about turrets being key part of defences, and it kind of implies, maybe possibly, speculatively, that we might be able to build turrets in our outposts, which would not be a surprise given that we can in Fallout. But as for how outpost attacks might work, in Fallout 4 they were very annoying because you'd often have to drop what you were doing on the other side of the map, go back and defend your settlement. Hopefully with Starfield, they'll, fingers crossed, they'll go closer to what happens with Fallout 76, which is that your camp in Fallout 76 only gets attacked when a player is present. It might be yourself or it might be another player. That's a multiplayer game. This is not. But that would mean your attacks would only happen when you are home, which is a little bit, again, video game contrivance, but that would also make it much less annoying, so that would be fine, and potentially fun as well. So, yeah, we're obviously going to get different types of things, and obviously this list is going to get longer as you discover new things to build out your outposts, and maybe buy plans in different parts of the galaxy, and we also see from the research terminal that you can research not only stuff for upgrading armour and weapons, but you can also upgrade and research outpost stuff as well. The details we haven't seen yet, but it is a thing that's there, so you can see that in other parts of the footage. So, moving on from this for now. Modify mode. Oh, I've just spotted something I haven't seen before. So, toggle view, this is between Flycam and on-foot building, so at sort of player's eye view. Modify mode. That's interesting. Right, let's move on. So, placing that down, we'll stop there. We see that they've jumped on, placed a couple of habs on the end there, the prefab structures. So we've got what would appear to be a hydroponic hab B here. Presumably one of these science hab flat smalls here, looks like. And we're now looking at the round one, which alternates between being the plain and being glass, as we'll see in a moment. And I'm guessing the same thing was done here. Although this could be another hydroponic one, but I'm guessing they're mixing them up. So that's interesting. If you look closely, you'll see that where you position the hab in relation to each other, it takes a second, but the game automatically figures out where the connecting point is, like this here. So that it then puts a corridor and doorways in place, which otherwise would not be there, which presumably might also imply what this X is for. That's a snapping point. But I still think you might be able to put a manual door in there and a balcony or something. Anyway, we'll see one of the other things here. This foundation is too tall coming on, and this is highlighted red, and it can't be placed. So undoubtedly we're going to be hearing an annoying negatory sound as you try and press the button, the build button there. Which is, yeah, back to those nightmares from Fallout. But joking aside, obviously this foundation looks to be quite tall. It's kind of hard to tell from this particular angle and view, which is one of the reasons I don't like Flycam views so much, personally. That's a me thing. This sort of section here, obviously the ground is falling away faster in this sort of triangle here than it is back here, because it's placed okay here and it places okay here as well, as we'll see. But yeah, you can also see these are really quite tall, and the stairs in there, you've got those coming up, then round the corner, and then up again. If this was flat ground, I want to know if I could pull this right down, or even with it not being flat ground, can I have the airlock very, very close to ground level and then build out from that, so I don't have to have so much exposed stick foundation? Because I'm not into that, and I think it's probably going to be possible, or at least there'll be different types of Outpost airlocks. Possibly this player just does not know the plans for non-staired versions or short-staired versions. But it's a question I have, because otherwise most of what we see is quite tall, and I have concerns regarding that. Everything looking like it's on spindly sticks would get, for me at least, old fast. Let's see what happens. So they try and place it there, it won't do it. Try a different one, it'll go there, and it'll go there. Just fine. And you can see the doors popping up there as well as they move these habs around. Obviously this is jumping around and just sort of computing as it goes forward, which is fine. Okay, we can see the build limit has jumped up a little bit here in the corner, and I'll go back and show this again in just a second so you can actually see it in more detail. But yeah, they're fairly substantial. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 habs here and no furniture or anything else. That's it. And that build limit is going up quite quickly. Now, whether or not we'll be able to glitch our way past it, obviously Bethesda won't encourage that, but it's an open question. We might be able to get mods to work past it as well, because mods are probably going to be a big thing on down the line. I imagine there will be a way around the build limit eventually, especially given that the build area, that we can sort of see the edge of at the top, is decently large. I think we'll be able to probably, sooner or later, find a way around that. Of course, the inevitable problem there is, as always with Fallout 4, and what they work hard to make sure doesn't happen in 76, is that if you do get past that build limit, that's when you start to tank frame rates, because your computer is doing so much more processing of where the object locations are, as well as rendering them and so on and so forth. And obviously placing loose objects, like the loose objects that we can pick up around the world, which we know is a returning feature and common in every Bethesda game ever, that stuff tends to be very CPU intensive, so it's likely that that obviously will drag your frame rates down if you've got a lot of those as well. But it does look like we can place some stuff like that, which we'll have a look at in a moment. But yeah, quite interesting. So let's go back and then you'll have a look at just how fast this build limit is going up whilst they're building as well. So there we go, nothing at the moment, and it's jumping up fairly, not massively rapidly, but fast enough that that could end up getting filled quicker than you might think. Obviously things like chairs are going to be considerably smaller in terms of how much budget they use up, but still, I reckon that could disappear quite quickly. So we've got some cool stuff here. Mopping Bot, who is definitely cool. You see a couple of robots in the footage here actually, sort of cruising around Outposts, which is quite nice. Nice sunset view out the back. This appears to be the more central of the rooms that were placed. We saw in the hub before, in the Outpost before, sorry. And we've got an interesting selection of furniture here as well. A massive pelican case here, which probably accesses storage in some way, or maybe it's just decoration, which is cool. I really like that the table is over the top of the case. Now, that might mean it's a single object. More likely, you can slide that underneath the table. So we're going to see this with shelves again in a bit, that they've improved on certain issues from 76 and not being able to put things under tables, chairs, tuck your chairs in, things like that. And being able to get stuff onto shelves is a bit of a nightmare in Fallout. You really have to glitch it. I'm guessing none of this stuff is done through glitching. So it looks like we'll be able to slot things under the tables quite nicely, which is a really, really cool thing to see. Nice little detail. Obviously, we've got different types of furniture going on. We saw the kind of sci-fi-ish sofas before in the earlier section. I'll jump quickly back to those so you can see them again. Just to refresh your memory. There we go. See, these, those look very cheap. Cheap sci-fi sofas. Not that everything has to look plush and premium, but, you know, variety is the spice of life. As we come back here, we've got something that's much more square and boxy. This almost looks like something out of Fallout, actually. Obviously updated and modified, but I suspect it's an entirely new asset that's been created with the same thing in the back of somebody's mind. Interesting looking table there. It's kind of teardrop shaped, I think. And that looks like it might slope, but that would make it a terribly ineffective table if it had a slope on it, so probably not. Got an armless sofa at the back there, almost a sofa bed style, futon thing. And a much more leather, kind of stylish, old school looking chair here. This kind of says more Freestar Collective to me. If you look around, there's, throughout this footage, there's 2 or 3 different, at least 2 kind of different styles of furniture and stuff. Some stuff that leans more Freestar, some that looks a little bit more United Colonies and traditional space exploration. It's a bit more homey, this. It's interesting to see the variety there, so I suspect we'll be unlocking a lot of interesting furniture options, and hopefully for building external structures and stuff like that as well as we go on. It's also worth mentioning, it is almost certain that DLC for Starfield will include Outpost building related stuff, because out of the 6 Fallout 4 DLCs, 3 of them were building related. In fact, they provided a lot of the coolest stuff to build with, certainly in the latter stages of the game's lifespan. Or, well, actually the latter 2/3 of it, really. So that will probably happen here, and obviously if you go look at Fallout 76, there is barely a week goes by that something new isn't released for the building section of the game, at least on some level or other. So yeah, it's likely we'll be getting a lot more than the base game, and there is probably a lot more out there that we are not being shown. So yeah, lots of cool stuff in here. Let's move on a little bit. Next room here, we've got something much more techy. There's stuff here that I have numerous questions about. That looks like the previous room that we will have another look at in a bit, with a weird map table type thing in the middle there. Lots of different styles of computer screens. That's really weird. I wonder if it has a specific function. There's a lantern there. I've got a construction light that looks almost out of place, I might say, but it's a very basic functional design. There's also a tabletop version of this that we'll see in a minute. And yeah, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I suppose, as a functional item. Really cool. We've got a bit of wall decoration there with the sign. Given the location of that, it makes absolutely no sense there. It's almost certainly been manually placed. Having it over a doorway or by some kind of opening would make sense. Just here, doesn't. But we've got some banks of computers. All these chairs look to be the same. Looks like the furniture goes reasonably far back, but it also looks like there might possibly be room for that. Hopefully Bethesda have improved on their object collision box size, and it's much snugger to the edge of the actual object. Because in previous games that was a bit of a bugbear at times. Move on a little bit further. So on the side we've got more storage under a table. We've got a sack truck trolley dolly thing in there. Big wall-mounted TV. 2 different styles of lights here that we're seeing, which is quite cool. Not sure what this stuff on the wall is. I'm not really into that, but okay. A couple of safes, big and a small one there. Little storage boxes. Not particularly heavily decorated this. These are interestingly sort of dividers. Right, I'm going to stop there again as well, because if we see on the left here, so we've got metal tables, metal table that's kind of solid, different style of, I think these 2 are the same table actually. But over here we also have a wooden, almost, again, leaning back, it says Freestar Collective to me, style table. So variations in decoration style, which is cool to see. So, outside. This looks to be the same map. You see we've got a landing pad here. I think this is a ship that shuttles between outposts. I think. That's my big theory. As we'll see, again, in a subsequent shot, a second angle with a ship landing as the Frontier is in the background, which is the player ship. So I'm guessing one's the active player ship, the other one is shuttling stuff between outposts. Because I don't imagine you'll see multiples of your ships sitting around. I think you'll probably have to go to a starport and then unpack a different ship if you want to change, I'm guessing. Although you might be able to do it at outposts, we'll see. I'm guessing probably not, though. So down here we've got all those storage items again. As for decoration versus cargo storage versus something else, again, who knows. But cool nonetheless. It adds a bit more interest to the area around the landing pad. There's an extractor in front of it. Still curious as to what these arrays on the top might be. I want to come back to, again, the foundations. These are very tall foundations. Now, you can sort of see now from this angle, assuming this is the same structure we were looking at in Flycam mode when they were building, why they were having difficulty putting that circular hab that you can see here on this side, because that is very tall. That's not quite as tall. That is, and assuming the ground is falling away in that direction, which it looks like it probably is, so obviously we've got a slope here, then yeah, you're probably reaching about the limit of height here. However, as I say, this is not particularly what I want to be seeing. This is not so much the foundations. So I would like to be able to pull this down and hopefully do something about that so that these will sit much closer. Now, I'll go back a little bit again and then let this run on so you haven't got the annoying UI bit in the way. But you can sort of see the airlock here is on a different style of foundation, which is quite cool. And we see the stairs are actually clipping into the ground a bit here. I'm guessing this landing is about as low as this will sit. Hopefully, as I say again, we'll get a version without this whole level on it, so that we can have it just sort of sink into the ground more and sit closer. Hopefully. I would be surprised if we don't get something like that, and if we don't, I'd bet you dollars to donuts modders are going to make sure we can get something like that, but we'll have to wait for that, obviously. But yeah, that's my big thing. I don't like exposed foundations like this. They're not particularly attractive to look at, they're not particularly interesting, they're functionally important, but I want this sitting closer to the ground where possible. But, as I say, you can see this clipping into the ground, which makes me think that at least some variation there is possible and sinking those stairs in, so it's not a completely forced level of height. I think there's probably a minimum height, which probably is having this landing exposed, but we shall see. So you can really see the stairs there. Okay, so this is the other angle on that first room that we were talking about. You can see the cheapo looking sofas and the ship, and where I would like to put a balcony. I'll get off that dead horse now. Load more interesting storage boxes of different styles, which is really cool to see. I mentioned those tabletop construction lights. There they are. A completely different style of chair there, the wooden one. This rug reminds me of one from Fallout 76. Lots of cool, interesting decoration items. Not a lot on the surfaces in terms of major detail. And sort of cluttered, scrappy living is not really a thing in Starfield, and it kind of makes sense from a sci-fi perspective. But the Freestar Collective definitely has more of that kind of a vibe, so we'll have to see. Hopefully, if we want to lean into more of a Freestar vibe, there'll be more Freestar-looking habs and prefabs, and hopefully we'll be able to decorate in a more of a cluttered Space Cowboy style vibe. There's a few things knocking around that make me think that that might be a possibility, just stylistically. An interesting storage unit on the wall there that's kind of hidden in shadow, but there's a cupboard. How much of these act as storage you can go over and actually drop stuff into, and how that whole mechanic will work is an open question. I'm guessing they kind of do work a bit like stash boxes in Fallout 76 or your workbench at a settlement in Fallout 4. I'm guessing it's functionally similar to that, but they might be purely aesthetic. So, moving on a little bit, we have another example here. A couple of things I want to talk about. Obviously, we've got a whole range of interesting bits of decoration going on here. Different textures on the windows to what we've seen in previous habs. Let's come back a bit. So, see the windows are quite different. I'm guessing that means it's structurally a different one, but hopefully that also means that you can then attach different windows to different buildings and do it manually if you want to. But the thing that really interests me in this, other than the fact that there's a respectable level of decoration in here, there's actually quite a lot more going on than you notice at first, which is quite cool. I think this is a research station, so if you want to research upgrades for your weapons, armour or outposts, or possibly this is it, but one of these looks a lot like it's, actually I think on reflection I think it's this one, and then you'd see a UI element coming up on here that we interact with. Companions at your outpost, by the way, can actually interact with this, because we see in later footage as well. I'm wondering, though, really, in the background, what's this white and orange structure here? This tall thing here looks to be a windmill generator. This, I'm curious about. It's got very spaceship kind of vibes, but except at the front end. And it's obviously on some kind of structure here, but I'm wondering if it's a giant battery, some kind of power storage thing, some other form of generator. It's something we haven't really seen anywhere else. We'll see it in the background of another shot in a moment, but basically we don't see it anywhere else. And there's no indicator as to what it might be, so curious. Ooh, rubber matting on the floor there. We've seen a few rugs. There's one here. Jump back, got rubber matting on the floor for decorating up the floor, breaking up textures, making different rooms sort of interesting and relating to their function as well. Moving on. There's a different boss again, which is cool to see, and we see a ship landing in the background here. So the obvious big question is, if the player is down here in a single-player game taking pictures of the bot, why is that ship landing in the background? Because they're obviously not on it, which is one of two possibilities. Either it's a contrivance for the purposes of the footage, and is, therefore something that wouldn't come up in the game. Unlikely, given that this is heavily gameplay-orientated. I suspect this is, in fact, running cargo between outposts and is therefore actually landing in the background. And it's just a cool shot they happened to get and went, yeah, that's going in. That's my guess. So looking at this one, we are obviously at a different outpost on a different planet. What the heck is this in the distance? Now, is that stone? It looks like it might be some kind of artificial structure. Curious. That looks like it might be a city of something or some kind of artificial structure as well. That's very interesting. No idea what planet this is, but obviously this sort of thing's going to be procedurally generated. So actually saying I'm going to go and look for that is probably not actually a thing that you can do. There's something way off in the distance there as well. But it gives you an idea that random things in the distance you're going to be able to spot and go, what's that, and go and look. So that's cool. Anyway, focusing on Outposts. Not sure what this is. I think actually this is a light of some kind. Some kind of like street lamp tower thing. Extractor, windmill. And again, we can start to see here, the really interesting thing is that, obviously with this stuff here that we haven't seen before, whatever that is, what we saw in the last shot, also we start to see the stairs kind of clipping into the ground a bit here, which, also we're seeing these being a lot lower, these prefabs, but question is, does it get any lower than this? Because obviously you've got the strut here, and can you get that any lower? I'm hoping you can. This looks like maybe it does go a bit lower, but yeah. So let's jump back and have a look at that one more time, then you can actually see these stairs. Okay, there we go. Yeah, you can really see that clipping into the ground actually there. Even the landing there is really clipping into the ground, which is interesting. Whether or not it's meant to do that, whether or not that's a reliable thing is anybody's guess at this point, but hopefully that indicates a good possibility of getting things to sink in, or maybe stuff will disconnect as it gets closer to the ground and effectively this will just disappear. That would be a cool feature, but who knows at this point. So, next bit of footage. Here we go. There's a couple of things that are interesting here. Here is the frontier. This is the starter ship the player gets. Here is another ship landing. So that's really the thing I was talking about with the emphasis on it looking like ships are arriving and departing. Your outpost will be involved in connecting them. So we've got a couple of things here. We've got whatever this is. It looks like it might be part of the entrance onto this landing pad. I'm guessing when you choose to land at your outpost, you'll select the outpost and the landing pad will be where you arrive once you've built one. Otherwise, you'll probably just land nearby and have to jog in. Seems like a likely scenario. There's the outpost beacon there. We've also got this structure that we will see more of in a moment, but we haven't seen anywhere else. It looks like some kind of hydroponics dome of some sort. Yeah, again, another very simple outpost. We see a much taller one here, or a much taller angle of it here. Yeah, key thing, obviously, we've got this stack of stuff which looks almost the same as what we saw before, but not quite the same. So it looks like maybe each of these might be component sections, and you place them down and you can just stack them up any way you like. Which still begs the same question we've been asking the whole time, but who knows. Now, I've heard it suggested that these might be solar generators. That's possible. They're on interesting foundations, but these also look a little small and odd for solar panels, so who knows. I wonder if they do something else entirely, maybe collect some other type of resource, possibly from the atmosphere, who knows, but we will see, I guess. Really like this cockpit, it's quite interesting on the ship there. But looking at this, we do have the inside of that dome from the previous shot, so this is the dome up here. Jump onto this. Not a lot to be said about this other than some kind of hydroponics thing. We've got different plants in here. Maybe this will be plants for resources. It's not the most uniquely designed and laid out interior, but I do actually like these orange kind of contrast bits. But it seems to do the job. You've got multiple layers, which is cool. It uses the space more efficiently than it would have done in previous Bethesda games, so that's definitely a good addition. I like to see that. Yeah, I'm guessing these are farmable plants, and that's what they're there for collecting resources. So maybe you'll have several of these with different plants in them, or maybe you'll have different ones on top and the bottom and in the middle. Who knows? It'd be interesting to explore that, because we do know there's going to be a lot of resource acquisition elements to the use of outposts. So we've got a couple of shots here where we see the exterior of the outpost on different worlds. We've got a very frozen looking planet or moon here with very little atmosphere, so I'm guessing this is quite a small world. So we've got a cool look at outposts in different environments there. Let's come back a little bit more and have a look at this one. I think this is the same outpost from a different angle. Landing pad there. I wonder what these do. Some resource extraction thing, possibly? Who knows? Cool little ship there. Some more cool furniture designs. Again, a bit more rustic and traditional, old-fashioned looking. In fact, I said they'd even look old-fashioned today, so that's quite cool. Nice little ship takeoff in the background. This is also kind of interesting. I was thinking for a moment this might show the outposts much closer to the ground. It really doesn't. This particular shot comes right at the end of the showcase where the various members of the development team are talking about some of their favourite things from the game, the things they enjoy doing the most and so on. Somebody does mention Outposts, not too surprisingly, but there is some interesting stuff to see here that I really want to highlight. Top of the list, I quite like the difference in shapes that we're starting to see here. This looks much more interesting. We're seeing the Outpost airlock here. Instead of just being on the end of a long line of stuff, it's beside a building and stuff's coming out around the side. This looks much more interesting and visually appealing. Wonder what these are. Perhaps adding additional functionality to the rooms, I guess. It's kind of interesting and curious. Maybe they're purely decorative, but it's an external bunch of stuff that adds extra decoration. This is obviously part of the world, you know, the flora, that's the one, of the planet this is built on. This is a watchtower that we talked about briefly before, and a load more of these storage crates, which again look different, so that's cool. We've also got, off in the distance, halfway up the hillside, there's a hub up here with a separate entrance and stuff. Something going on up there that is separate to what's going on down here. So, giving a bit more, again, indication of the fact that the build area is a decent size here, which is very, very cool to see. Lots and lots of details here. There's some really cool stuff in here that I do want to highlight, other than mostly stuff we've seen before. Some more sci-fi looking furniture here. Shelves. We've got stuff on the shelves. Now, we see stuff under tables. We've seen a few bits of that. I suspect these are manually placed, and therefore solving some of the issues in 76. Not so much of an issue in Fallout 4, though it still wasn't perfect. But in 76, putting stuff on shelves is a nightmare. So as to whether or not this comes from the build menu, I don't know. Some of this stuff looks like it's gift shop tourist tat, you know, that you pick up on holiday. And there's certainly places out there like Neon where you might buy cool little things and souvenirs and stuff like that. Souvenirs, that's probably the word I was looking for. And then place them in your outpost to make it a bit more homely. Some of this stuff looks like it might be vaguely similar to that as well. So stuff like this going on shelves is really cool to see, and the level of each individual shelf has something different on it. Love to see it. You get shelves like this in Fallout as well, and they look out of place. They actually don't here, which is nice. Another cool thing that I really do like is this table. We've got a board game here, and whatever the hell that is. Looks like some kind of biological sample, possibly. But my guess is that these two in particular are non-static objects that you can walk around, pick up from lying around the world, a bit like desk fans or whatever in Fallout, and then place them manually, like you could in Fallout 4, to decorate your camp. As to whether or not they're static when you place them, well, you never know. We had a mod to make them static so they didn't go flying around and get knocked about the place by allies and the player. Hopefully we either get a mod for that or there's an option in the build menu. We haven't seen one, but you never know. That would be nice, certainly a handy feature. But at the very least, it'll get modded in if it's not in the base game, so the fact that we can decorate with this stuff is always good to see. So, nice to see that Bethesda are embracing this, because obviously this is Bethesda built, so they are planning for players doing that, which was less true in Fallout 4. So that's a promising thing to see. Hopefully they will be accommodating such things a little bit better, and it won't impact performance so much. So, the last couple of things I want to talk about are skills. So we had a look at a number of skills. When you actually watch the footage really closely, and you really need to go through this frame by frame to see this in a great deal of detail, it looks like Bethesda have possibly deliberately hidden skills, that information about skills they didn't want to show. But there are two Outpost skills that we see the names of that we do not see any details about them. I would not be terribly surprised to find out there's a few more skills than that, maybe up to one in each tree. But we can't really tell at the moment because it's not like they went through the full list. We'll have to wait for the game's launch for that. But there are two that we see, and generally in previous games, particularly Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, there are a couple of base building related skills, but not much more than that. So I don't think we'll see a lot, but we've got these two that we can see here. So what we have here is a still that I went through via literally frame by frame to get it. We have under the social tab, Outpost Management. Now, when you scroll across, information pops up at the bottom here. It's possible that they scrolled too quickly for the game to pull that information out of memory and show it to you, so it didn't pop up that quickly. But it is slightly more likely at this point that it was deliberately obscured, as there are occasions where stuff pops up mighty quick and they haven't removed it. So I'm guessing there's interesting details that they're keeping from us in here. So we've got Outpost Management. The other one is Outpost Engineering. Now, we also know allies, as we're going to see in just a moment, can have, sort of player companions, can have the same skills we can, at least some of them, including, we know for a fact, one has Outpost Engineering. So one big question is here, as we look at the crew roster, we get to see what their skills are. Now, Hella here, who we do see in the footage, is currently not assigned to an outpost. He has geology, which is probably a skill that is going to relate to outposts. It might have other functions, but I can't imagine what. I suspect it will probably relate to outposts. And we have outpost engineering that he has here. So my question here is, if I assign Hella to an outpost, will his higher skill, if I don't have outpost engineering, allow me to build or do things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do because he can do it for me or not? No idea. Seems like a possibility, but I don't know. I think the different stars, incidentally, are ranks, because we know skills have up to 4 ranks, and you can do more with them as you complete challenges to rank them up and make yourself more effective with that skill. Obviously, look at Barrett here, who's got 4 ranks in Starship Engineering. Hella here is looking somewhat less useful with 3 ranks in Outpost Engineering. So that also begs the question, can allies or companions or crew, whatever word you want to use, increase their skill level over time as the player can? Or maybe they level up with the player. It wouldn't surprise me if they could. It also wouldn't terribly surprise me if they didn't either. But we'll see. Also, interesting point, this is one of the places where we can confirm that planets that have cities on them, you can also build outposts on, including ones that have Earth-like atmospheres. As we see down here, we're going to see Hella being assigned to Jameson Outpost 1 as well in a second, but we also see the security minibot already assigned there. Jameson is the planet where we find New Atlantis. It's in the Alpha Centauri system, and obviously there is an outpost here. And we know this is definitely right because we're going to see, as I say, now the assignment of Hella here to Jameson Outpost 1 and Outpost 0 of 1. Curious as to what the in and outs of that are. That's probably the maximum number of people you can actually have assigned to the outpost at this point. Obviously the security minibot doesn't count, I'm guessing. Which probably relates to outpost management. So maybe the outpost management skill will allow you to have more people at your outpost. That seems as more and more as you rank it up. Seems like a possibility. But yeah, if we take that a moment and take Jameson Outpost 1 and compare it to what we saw way back here, we can see Outpost 1, this is the first outpost being built on this planet as this is placed. There we go. Confirms that we can build them on those planets too. So yeah, quite interesting to have a look at the different skills. Obviously, looking at what we've got available here, Starship Engineering probably doesn't apply to outposts. Particle beam weapons, nah. Robotics, maybe when it comes to putting defences in place, security minibots, and possibly turrets, because turrets do fall under this robotic skill. I think we can actually see that back in the footage here somewhere. There we go. In an age where robots and autonomous turrets are employed in a combat capacity, study of robotics can be instrumental in gaining tactical advantage. Now, we don't see any more details than that about the skill, but it is possible that this might allow you to build turrets at your outpost. So, gastronomy? Not sure. That might apply. It's one of the only food-related things we actually see, so exactly what the ins and outs are of that, I don't know. Maybe it gives you buffs, and that's about it. And Barrett obviously fancies himself a chef. Clearly not a particularly good one if he's only got 1 rank. Like geology, I suspect that does apply as regards resources and minerals and that sort of thing, detecting and extracting. Outpost engineering, building, maybe the efficiency at which different resources are extracted as well, it might affect that. So assigning Hella, who has 3 ranks, will probably boost it further than somebody who had 1, for example. Marika here has shotgun, ballistics, and particle beam weapons, so she's basically a fighter with no other skills. Sam Coe, this is a curious one. He's a space cowboy, and yet he has a rifle certification. That's weird. Bethesda have done things like this before in other games, given weird skills to people that just don't line up with what they profess to be. That's odd. Piloting, obviously not going to be relevant. Payloads, this is to do with cargo in a ship. We actually see that elsewhere when they scroll over it. And again, geology, vaguely interesting, potentially related to outposts. Astrodynamics, lasers, leadership, botany. Botany might relate to outposts because it is mentioned elsewhere in the showcase that plants can be harvested for certain resources and outposts can harvest those automatically. So that will probably relate to that as well. So there we go, nearly at the end now. This is Hella, I think, activating the research station that we can place down in order to research upgrades to weapons, armor, ships, and outposts. We get a decent look at some different furniture and plants and stuff in there as well as a ship landing in the background as well. And we see the other side of that same shot. As you see, this menu you'll actually see elsewhere in the showcase, and actually even in the showcase this time last year, showing off the research interface for sort of various upgrades. And there we go. That is the lot. So, I'm going to have to edit this down like crazy because I have been chattering for a very long time. So lots of little details and lots of interesting stuff that we can see in there. I hope you guys found this an interesting, really deep dive into what we have from the Outposts, just based on, frankly, just a few minutes of footage that we had in the showcase, because they really didn't show us that much. I edited it down to 1 minute and 20 seconds worth of footage here. You could probably stretch it out to 1 minute 30 if you look at a few other little bits and pieces that pertain to it elsewhere as well. But yeah, I managed to pull basically an hour's worth of chatter out of this, out of 1.5 minutes worth of footage, deep diving into it. So I hope you found this interesting and informative. Hopefully subsequent videos on various bits and pieces of Starfield, which will be coming over the next few weeks between now and September, will be interesting to you as well. If you're interested in literally pulling this showcase apart piece by piece, which is my plan for the summer, then do hit subs and notification bell and all that good stuff, and then you get notified every time I upload. And do check out the follow-up stuff as well if you're new here. Obviously, that will be continuing too. We've got build videos and live streams and stuff as well. Starfield will, of course, be getting live streamed once we get our hands on it. 1st of September, I should imagine. And yeah, really, really looking forward to getting into this. So very, very hyped. Down below as well, social media links. There is merch store down there and channel memberships on the blue join button. If you would care to support the channel in that way, hugely helps out as well. I massively, massively, massively appreciate it. So huge thank you to everyone who's done that. And yes, do join us, as I say, for live streams and future videos. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.